and welcome to Crowvane Manor. Wherever you are, and whatever kind of night it's been, you've come to the right place to slow down. Let the world go quiet for a while. Out here, none of it needs your attention. Many of you return to these rooms night after night, and I'm grateful for that. There's a reason you keep coming back. The stories kept inside these walls aren't quite like the ones you'll hear anywhere else. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. And if these stories stay with you, a like and a subscribe help more than you know. Now get comfortable, breathe slow, and let's open the door together.
"6 weeks after my dad died, he came down on me like I was failing some kind of test. And the thing that still makes my stomach twist when I think about it is how unreal that timing was. My dad had just gone through a 7-month battle after his stroke. 7 months of trying to come back. 7 months where every day felt heavy and uncertain. 7 months where the air in my life felt like it was made of worry. Watching someone you love fight to return to themselves is its own kind of slow heartbreak. You're constantly bracing for bad news, constantly hoping for small improvements, constantly trying to be strong while your insides are shaking. And then when it ends, when they're gone, it doesn't just hurt, it rearranges you. It changes your body, it changes your mind, it changes the way time moves. It's not a sadness you can schedule your way out of. It's not something you get over because a certain number of days have passed. It's grief. It's losing your dad. It's the worst thing that had ever happened to me. And I was still inside that early stage of it, that raw stage where everything feels unreal and sharp at the same time. 6 weeks is nothing. 6 weeks is barely enough time for the shock to fade. 6 weeks is barely enough time to realize the world is still moving, even though yours stopped. 6 weeks is barely enough time to get through the funeral, to handle the practical parts, to return calls, to say thank you to people, to exist in your own home, without expecting a phone call that won't come anymore. 6 weeks is barely enough time to take a full breath without it catching. That's when he decided I wasn't prioritizing him enough. Not gently, not with care, not with curiosity, not with a single ounce of compassion. He came down hard. Like my grief was an inconvenience that had gone on too long. Like I had missed my deadline for being okay. Like he was counting the days until he could demand the normal relationship benefits again. He acted offended that I wasn't back to scheduling dates, back to giving him energy, back to being fun, back to being available, back to being the version of me that existed to keep him happy. And the part that honestly shattered something in me was how clear his real complaint was underneath the words. He was mad I wasn't back to being DTF. It's one thing for a partner to miss you during grief. It's normal for someone to feel lonely, to feel unsure, to not know how to help. But what matters is how they handle it. A loving partner leans in. A loving partner asks what you need. A loving partner makes life easier, not harder. A loving partner understands that grief isn't a switch you flip off. A loving partner doesn't treat your pain like an interruption to their pleasure. But he did. He acted like my dad dying was something happening to our schedule instead of something happening to my soul. I remember that moment of realization like a cold light turning on in a room I didn't want to look at. Because up until then, I think part of me still believed he loved me in his own way. I think I had been making excuses for him for a long time. I think I had been translating his selfishness into misunderstandings, his lack of empathy into awkwardness, his emotional absence into stress. I think I wanted to believe he was capable of showing up for me when it really mattered, because that's the bare minimum you should be able to expect from someone who says they love you. You expect that when life hits you in the deepest place, your partner will be there as shelter, not as another storm. And then my dad died, and instead of becoming softer, he became harsher. That's when I understood something that felt painful, but also strangely clarifying. He didn't truly love me. He loved what I provided. He loved the role I played in his life. He loved having someone who organized things, someone who planned, someone who showed up, someone who met his needs, someone who made him feel wanted, someone who gave him comfort and attention and sex and companionship. He loved the benefits. He loved the steady supply of girlfriend energy. But he didn't love me as a whole person. Because if he loved me as a whole person, my grief would have mattered to him. My pain would have mattered to him. Losing my dad would have mattered to him in a way that made him protective, patient, and present. Instead, he treated it like I was letting him down. There's something so lonely about being grieving in front of someone who is impatient with your grief. It makes you feel like you're doing something wrong just by hurting. It makes you feel like you have to hide your sadness so you don't get punished for it. It makes you feel like your emotions are inconvenient, like your humanity is a problem. And the more someone pressures you to get back to normal, the more you realize they don't understand you at all. Because grief isn't a phase you move through quickly to get back to being useful. Grief is love with nowhere to go. Grief is your body trying to adjust to a world where your dad is not in it anymore. Grief is waking up and forgetting for a second, then remembering all over again. Grief is hearing a song, smelling something familiar, seeing a random object, and suddenly feeling like you can't breathe. Grief is not something you can rush for someone else's comfort. I think what made it so devastating was the contrast between what I needed and what I got. I needed someone to hold my hand without asking for anything. I needed someone who could sit with me in silence. I needed someone who could make me a meal, handle a chore, take something off my plate. I needed someone who would look at me and say, "You don't have to be okay. I'm here." I needed gentleness. I needed safety. I needed time. He gave me pressure. He gave me criticism. He gave me the sense that I was failing him by being shattered. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Because if someone can't show love when it's hard, then what kind of love is it? If someone only treats you well when you are convenient, cheerful, and meeting their needs, that isn't love. That's consumption. That's someone enjoying the output you produce, not the person you are. That's someone wanting the relationship benefits without the relationship responsibility. That's someone who sees you as a service, not a partner. I remember thinking, how can you look at someone 6 weeks after losing their father and still make it about you? How can you hear the words, "My dad died," and your first emotion is irritation that you're not getting dates and sex? How can you be that empty inside? And the answer is hard, but it's simple. Some people don't love the way they pretend to love. Some people are in relationships for what they can take, not for what they can build. Some people want a partner the way they want a product, to function, to perform, to meet needs, to stay pleasant, to not require too much care. And grief is the moment that exposes them, because grief demands patience. Grief demands empathy. Grief demands that you stop centering yourself for a while and become supportive. Grief demands that you see your partner as a human being who is suffering. If someone cannot do that, it shows you exactly what the relationship was always built on. It also changes the way you look back on everything. Because once I realized he didn't love me, I started remembering all the little moments that didn't make sense before, all the times he only seemed happy when he was getting what he wanted, all the times he became cold when I needed something, all the times he acted like my feelings were a problem to solve or a nuisance to ignore. Suddenly it all lined up. It wasn't random. It was consistent. It was who he was. And I think that's the heartbreak inside the heartbreak. Your dad dies, and you're already dealing with the biggest loss of your life. And then you realize the person next to you is not safe. So you're grieving two things at once. You're grieving your father, and you're grieving the idea of your relationship. You're grieving the fantasy that your partner would hold you when you fell apart. You're grieving the version of love you thought you had. It's like the floor gives out in two different places, and you're left trying to stand with nothing solid under you. But even though it hurts to remember, that moment also gave you something important. It gave you clarity. It gave you a line in the sand. It showed you the truth in a way that couldn't be explained away. And that truth, as brutal as it was, is what helps you protect yourself later. Because once you know the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you provide, you stop trying to earn love by being useful. You stop trying to perform your way into being treated well. You stop blaming yourself when someone lacks empathy. You start listening to what your body is telling you when something feels wrong. A person who truly loves you does not punish you for grieving. They do not demand that your pain fit neatly into their schedule. They do not treat your heartbreak like a delay in their entertainment. They do not make you feel guilty for being human. They step up. They carry things for you. They protect you. They make room for your sadness without making it about themselves. And the fact that you realized it, even though it hurt, is the point where you stopped letting him define what love looks like. Because love isn't someone getting mad that you're not back to normal after losing your dad. Love is someone who stays close to you in the worst moment of your life and makes sure you don't have to carry it alone. When I was first starting college, something in me finally started to wake up. It wasn't like one magical moment where everything suddenly became perfect. But it was the first time I felt like I was stepping into my own life instead of just floating through it. I was away from what I had always known, surrounded by new people, new classes, new ideas, and for the first time I could feel myself changing in a way that felt real. I wasn't just doing what I thought I was supposed to do anymore. I was figuring out who I actually was. I started paying attention to what made me curious, what made me excited, what made me want to stay up late reading even when I was tired. I didn't even realize how hungry I was for that feeling until I found it. And then I found the thing that clicked so hard it almost shocked me: bioarchaeology. The study of human remains in archaeological contexts. Even saying the word felt like it belonged to me. It wasn't just interesting in a casual way. It felt like the kind of work that could hold my attention forever. It was the way bones could tell a story without anyone speaking. It was how a person's life could be traced through the marks left on their skeleton. It was the idea that history wasn't just dates and names. It was real bodies, real lives, real people, and that you could learn about them through careful study. Osteology became the kind of topic that made me light up. I wanted to understand everything. I wanted to learn how to identify bones, how to read trauma, how to recognize age markers, how to interpret signs of disease, how to piece together what someone went through. I wanted to know how the environment, food, work, injury, and even social structures could leave clues behind. Once I got that spark, I couldn't keep quiet about it. I talked about it all the time because I was genuinely excited. I would come out of class with my head full of ideas and want to share them. I'd be reading something and run into a detail that blew my mind, and I'd want to tell someone right away. I signed up for anything that could give me experience. I looked for fieldwork, not because someone forced me to, but because I was eager. I wanted to be out there, learning by doing, getting my hands dirty, seeing what real work looked like, gaining skills, building a foundation. I didn't want to just have a degree. I wanted to truly know what I was doing. I was proud of myself too, in a quiet way. I was proud that I had found something that felt like it fit me. I was proud that I cared. I was proud that I could see a future for myself that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. And because I was dating someone at the time, it felt natural to want to share it with him. That's what you do when you're with someone. At least, that's what I believed then. You share your excitement. You share the thing that makes you feel alive. You let them see you growing, and they're supposed to be happy for you. They're supposed to like seeing you become more yourself. So I tried to bring him into my world, at least a little. I didn't expect him to become an expert or suddenly care about the same exact details the way I did. I just wanted him to listen the way a partner listens. I wanted him to smile and ask a question, even a basic one. I wanted him to say something like, "That's really cool," or "I love how into this you are," or even just, "Tell me what you learned today." I wanted him to treat it like it mattered because it mattered to me. But instead, he started reacting like my passion was annoying. At first, it was subtle, a sigh, a change in his face. That look people get when they're pretending to listen, but they're already checked out. Sometimes he'd interrupt me with a sarcastic little comment, like he wanted to make the topic sound childish. He'd say something like, "Ooh, bones," in this exaggerated tone, like I was some weird kid showing off rocks I found in the yard. He didn't say it like a playful tease between two people who love each other. He said it like he was embarrassed for me, like he wanted me to feel silly for caring. And the more he did it, the more I started feeling that slow, familiar shrink inside myself. Because it wasn't just that he didn't share the interest, it was that he was irritated by it. He wasn't neutral. He wasn't simply uninterested. He was actively annoyed at me for being passionate, and especially annoyed at me for putting time into it, the same time that was helping me build my future, the same time that was making me smarter and more skilled and more confident. He acted like my focus was somehow a personal inconvenience to him, as if my life had to be centered around keeping him entertained and comfortable. There were moments where I would be in the middle of explaining something that genuinely excited me, and I could literally see him shutting down. His expression would go flat. His body language would turn away. He'd stop responding in a warm way and start responding like he was being forced to sit through something boring. Sometimes he'd get overly annoyed about me wanting to learn as much as I could, like my motivation was some kind of flaw, like it was too much, like it was unnecessary, like I should be satisfied with doing the minimum. And every time he acted like that, it sent this message that was louder than anything he said directly. Your excitement is not welcome here. At first, I tried to push through it. I tried to explain anyway, hoping he'd catch on, hoping he'd eventually get used to it, hoping he'd realize how important it was to me. But after a while, it stopped feeling worth it. Because why would you keep sharing something precious with someone who treats it like a nuisance? It starts to feel like offering someone a gift over and over, just to watch them roll their eyes and toss it aside. Eventually, you stop bringing gifts. Eventually, you stop opening that part of yourself. So I did what a lot of people do in relationships like that, even if they don't realize it at the time. I adjusted. I got quieter. I stopped talking about it with him. I didn't stop loving it. I didn't stop studying. I didn't stop pushing myself. I just stopped letting him see it. I started keeping my excitement to myself. I'd come home from something amazing and bite my tongue. I'd be reading something fascinating and not mention it. I'd have a good day in the field and not share the details. It wasn't because I suddenly became less passionate. It was because I learned he didn't like that part of me. Or, more accurately, he didn't like seeing me invest in myself. And what's sad is that when you stop sharing something like that, it changes the relationship in ways you don't always notice right away. You start living separate emotional lives. You're still together physically, still doing couple things, still talking about surface level stuff, but the deeper part of you is elsewhere. You're growing and changing and building a future, but you're doing it quietly, almost like you're sneaking it. That's not what love is supposed to feel like. Love is supposed to give you space to expand, not pressure you to shrink. Over time, I learned that his reactions weren't about Bones at all. They were about him. They were about his discomfort with me having something that didn't revolve around him. They were about him not wanting to be in a relationship with someone who was becoming more confident and more focused. Some people say they want a partner with dreams until their partner actually starts chasing them. Then, suddenly, those dreams become annoying, too much, obsessive, or boring. It's not because the dream is bad. It's because the partner wants control more than they want to see you thrive. And here's the part that makes me smile now. Because life has a way of proving the truth, even when someone tries to convince you otherwise. Needless to say, I built the life I was working for. I didn't just dabble in it. I didn't just enjoy it as a hobby. I made it my career. I became successful. I kept learning. I kept growing. I kept showing up for the work, even when it was hard, even when it took time, even when it demanded patience and focus and dedication. I became the person I was trying to become back when I was sitting in those early college classes, feeling that spark for the first time. And I also found my person. Not someone who tolerates me, not someone who gets irritated when I'm excited, not someone who acts like my passion is embarrassing. I found someone who is right there with me, someone who understands the world I'm in because he's in it too. He's an archaeologist, and the difference feels like night and day. With him, I don't have to translate my excitement into smaller words. I don't have to apologize for talking too much. I don't have to watch his face for signs of annoyance. When I start talking shop, he leans in. He asks questions. He adds his own thoughts. He shares his own experiences. He loves how passionate I am, not because he's pretending, but because he genuinely enjoys seeing me light up. He likes the part of me that my old boyfriend tried to dim. It's hard to explain how healing that is if you haven't lived both versions. With the wrong person, you feel like you're constantly trying to earn the right to be yourself. With the right person, you feel safe enough to be yourself without thinking about it. You can talk about what you love, and you don't feel like you're taking up too much space. You can be excited, and you don't feel embarrassed. You can be passionate, and it doesn't turn into a fight or a joke at your expense. It becomes a shared world. It becomes connection. Sometimes I think back to that younger version of me who stopped talking about bioarchaeology just to keep peace with a boyfriend who couldn't handle my growth. And I feel this mix of sadness and pride. Sadness that I ever thought I needed to be quieter to be loved, but pride that I never let his attitude change my path. I may have stopped sharing it with him, but I never stopped building it. And in the end, my life speaks for itself. The career, the success, the joy, and the partner who looks at my passion and sees something beautiful instead of something annoying. Now, when I talk about osteology or fieldwork or the details that make me excited, I do it freely. I don't hold back. I don't shrink my sentences. I don't swallow my happiness. And every time my husband listens with genuine interest, every time he smiles because he loves seeing me in my element, it reminds me of something important. The right love doesn't make you feel like, ooh, bones is a joke. The right love makes you feel like your passion is one of the best things about you. My ex-husband and I were already in counseling, which meant this wasn't some random, casual complaint you threw out once. This was serious enough that it had a place in a room with a counselor. Serious enough that it was clearly affecting your day-to-day sense of safety, and it makes complete sense that it was. You had been through a horrible car accident only a couple years earlier. You weren't just nervous in cars. You had lived through something that changed your body and your brain. Spinal surgery, a TBI, migraines and chronic pain that didn't just vanish when the bruises faded. PTSD on top of it, which means even when you're physically sitting in a car, your nervous system can still feel like it's back in that moment, blessed, waiting for impact. When someone has been through that, driving isn't neutral. Riding in a car isn't neutral. Safety matters in a way other people don't always understand, and a partner who loves you doesn't need to fully understand the biology of trauma to respect the basics. Slow down. Don't tailgate. Don't scare me. Don't make my body relive the worst thing it survived. But instead of respecting that, he used it against you. Whenever you asked him to slow down or stop tailgating, he'd get pissed and say, "I'm not the one that's been in an accident." That sentence is so ugly because it doesn't just dismiss your anxiety. It mocks it. It turns your trauma into an insult. It implies you're weak. It implies you're irrational. It frames him as superior because he hasn't been hurt, as if surviving a crash makes you less qualified to speak about safety. It's cruel and it's backwards, and it shows exactly what his goal was. He wasn't trying to reassure you. He was trying to shut you up. He was trying to make you feel ashamed for having fear, so you'd stop asking. Then you brought it into counselings, which is what you're supposed to do when you're trying to save a relationship. You named the anxiety. You explained how intense it is. You said you want to feel safe. You gave him a clear path to show up for you. And in front of the counselor, he performed. He said all the right things. He told you he'd listen. He agreed you should absolutely feel safe with him. He said he didn't want you to have anxiety. He made himself sound like a caring partner who just needed the conversation to click. And that's why what happened the very next day is so chilling, because it wasn't just him forgetting. It was immediate. It was deliberate. He was driving way too fast with you and your brother in the car. You asked him to slow down, and you had every reason to think he would actually respond differently, because you had literally just talked about it in counseling. You weren't asking out of nowhere. You weren't nagging. You were following the exact plan you two had just agreed to in front of a professional. You were giving him the chance to prove his words meant something. Instead, he started laughing in your face. Not a nervous laugh, not an awkward laugh, a maniacal laugh, wordless, like he was enjoying it. And then he sped up and started driving even crazier. 60 miles per hour in a 30 zone, blind curves, with you and your brother in the car. That's not a small oops. That's not a mistake. That's escalation. That's intimidation. That's him showing you, in the most dangerous way possible, that he had the power and you didn't, and that he could turn your fear into entertainment. That kind of laugh is what makes this stick in your mind, because it's not just reckless driving, it's sadism. It's the feeling that he wasn't only ignoring your safety, he was feeding off your panic. It's the realization that he understood you were scared and chose to amplify it anyway. And doing it after counseling makes it even worse, because it shows he wasn't confused about your needs. He had just heard them clearly and publicly, and he chose to do the opposite immediately. The counseling version of him was a mask. The next day version was the truth. It also puts his earlier comment in a different light. I'm not the one that's been in an accident. That wasn't just dismissives. It was the mindset that said your trauma made you an easy target. Like because you have PTSD and anxiety, he could call you irrational, and because you didn't feel safe, he could act like you were the problem. He used your history as a way to avoid accountability and then turned it into a way to control you, because if he can make you feel unsafe and powerless, you're more likely to back down. You're more likely to go quiet. You're more likely to stop asking. That's what intimidation is designed to do. And the fact that your brother was in the car matters too. It means he didn't care about witnesses. He didn't care about anyone else's safety either. He cared about proving a point. He cared about winning. He cared about dominance in that moment more than he cared about human life. I want to say this clearly, because it's easy for people to minimize driving issues like they're just annoying habits. What he did was dangerous and abusive. Using a vehicle like that, escalating speed when someone is begging you to slow down, laughing while you panic, driving recklessly with blind curves, that's not bad driving. That's putting people at risk on purpose. That's the kind of behavior that can get someone killed. And the fact that he chose to do it right after promising to keep you safe is what makes it so psychologically brutal. It's betrayal plus fear at the same time. It makes sense that it would stick with you. Your body would remember it, even if you tried to forget. Because when you've already survived a crash and you're still living with the aftermath, spinal surgery, TBI, migraines, chronic pain, your nervous system isn't just nervous, it's trying to keep you alive. And he took that and treated it like a joke. If there's any comfort in naming it now, it's this. You weren't overreacting. You weren't being dramatic. You weren't asking for something unreasonable. Please slow down and don't tailgate because I'm anxious and traumatized is one of the most basic, fair requests a person can make. A decent partner would respond with care. A decent human would respond with care. His reaction wasn't normal, and it wasn't your fault. You deserved a partner who made you feel safer than the world, not someone who turned your worst fear into a game. When I confronted my ex-husband about his affair, it didn't feel like a normal conversation between two adults. It felt like I had stepped into some nightmare version of my life where the person I thought I knew was suddenly a stranger. The affair blindsided me. I wasn't prepared for it. Not emotionally, not mentally, not even practically. It wasn't something I had been expecting in the background. It hit like a door being kicked in. One minute I was living inside the story I thought we had, and the next minute I was standing in the wreckage of it, trying to understand how something like this could have been happening right in front of me without me knowing. I remember the moment I decided to ask the question that now makes me want to grab my past self by the shoulders and say, please don't do that. I asked him what had attracted him to her. What did she have that I didn't? It felt like a natural question at the time. Like if I could find the missing piece, I could make sense of the betrayal. Like if he gave me an answer I could understand. it would soften the shock somehow. I thought maybe he'd say something vague, something cowardly, something like, "She listened to me," or "She made me feel special," or "I was unhappy and I didn't know how to talk about it." I thought he might say something that at least sounded human, even if it hurt. But that's not what happened. He looked at me and said, completely serious, "She never said no." There wasn't a pause. There wasn't a moment where he seemed embarrassed to say it. He didn't soften it. He didn't correct himself. He didn't rush to explain that he didn't mean it like that. He said it like it was just a simple fact, like he was naming a feature on a product, like he was describing something ordinary. My body reacted before my mind even caught up. I threw up. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a choice. It was my body rejecting what I had just heard. It was like my stomach and my nervous system understood the truth in a way my brain couldn't fully process yet. That answer was disgusting. It was a violent kind of honesty, not because it was truthful in a noble way, but because it revealed something rotten about how he saw women, how he saw sex, how he saw consent, and how he saw me. I can still remember the feeling of it, not just physically, but emotionally. The nausea wasn't only from the shock. It was from the realization that the man I was married to had reduced attraction to one thing: access. Not connection, not love, not intimacy, not mutual desire, not affection, not a relationship, access. A woman who never said no was attractive to him because she was easy to use, because she offered no friction, because she had no boundaries he had to respect, because she was not a person to him, she was a function. And I want to be clear about something that mattered so much to me, because it exposed how twisted his narrative was. We did not have a dead bedroom. We were not one of those couples where sex disappeared and resentment built up. In fact, my drive was higher than his. I was present. I was available. I was engaged. I wanted him. I wanted us. This wasn't him straying because he was starving for intimacy. This was him straying because intimacy wasn't what he was looking for. He wasn't chasing closeness. He was chasing power. When he said, "She never said no," it hit me that he wasn't describing her as a full human being. He wasn't even describing a relationship. He was describing compliance. He was describing a dynamic where he could take whatever he wanted without having to face the normal reality of another person's needs, moods, boundaries, or agency. It wasn't about passion. It wasn't about love. It was about getting what he wanted when he wanted it. That's why it made me feel like we had both been completely depersonalized. I felt like, to him, I was not a partner. I was not a wife. I was not a person with a mind and feelings and a whole life. I was a body, a faceless body, a thing he could want things from. And when I didn't behave like a thing, when I had boundaries, when I had a no, sometimes, when I had a moment of exhaustion or stress or illness or just being a human being, he didn't see it as normal. He saw it as a problem. He saw it as a denial of what he felt entitled to. And the worst part was realizing she was treated the same way. Even in that answer, he wasn't praising her personality. He wasn't admiring her. He wasn't even saying he loved her. He was describing her like a door that was always open, like her humanity didn't factor into it at all, which meant that if she was always saying yes, it wasn't because she was some magical, perfect woman. It was because she was caught in the same machine I was caught in. The machine where he needed to feel powerful, and women were the place he went to prove that power to himself. That's why I believe he hated himself. Because people who are at peace with themselves don't treat other human beings like that. People who respect themselves don't need to use and dehumanize others to feel better. People who have real self-worth don't commit hateful acts toward women to soothe their own emptiness. But he did. He did hateful things, and he framed them in the language of normal life. He tried to make it sound casual, like it was just a preference, like it was just what attracted him. But it wasn't a preference. It was entitlement. It was an ugly mindset. It was a worldview where women exist to serve and satisfy, and any boundary a woman has is treated like an offense. It made me think about every moment in our marriage where I had been reduced in small ways. The times he acted annoyed when I was tired. The times he acted like affection was something I owed him. The times he treated my desire like it should always be available on demand. The times my yes wasn't enough because what he really wanted was to never have to hear no. Because no meant I was a person. No meant I had agency. No meant I was not just an object in his world, and that was what he couldn't stand. After that moment, after the throwing up, after hearing that answer, something shifted. It was like my body gave my mind permission to see it plainly. I stopped trying to make it romantic. I stopped trying to frame it like a normal affair where someone falls in love or gets emotionally attached. I started seeing it for what it was. He wasn't in love. He was feeding a hunger for control. He was using women to medicate whatever shame and self-hatred he carried. And then there was her, the other woman, the person most people would immediately label as a villain. But the truth was more complicated, and that's part of what makes the whole thing so heavy. She didn't know she was in an affair. She didn't know she was part of this betrayal in the way people imagine. He was breadcrumbing her. He was feeding her just enough attention, just enough closeness, just enough hope to keep her emotionally invested while keeping the full truth out of reach. He wasn't giving her a real relationship either. He was using her too. He was controlling her reality the way he tried to control mine. It takes a certain kind of man to pull that off. A man who can split women into roles. One woman is the wife who holds real life together. The other woman is the fantasy who exists in secret. And both are kept in the dark about what he is really doing, because the darkness is where he gets his power. He gets to be the storyteller. He gets to decide what each woman knows. He gets to decide what each woman believes. He gets to play both sides and feel like he's winning. And in the middle of all that, she ended up doing something he never did for me. She told me the truth. I didn't tell her that he said that about her. I never told her that she never said no was the reason he gave. Part of me didn't want to hurt her with that kind of disgusting dehumanization because she had already been lied to. She had already been used. She didn't need to carry that extra weight. And part of me knew that if I told her, it would open a whole new layer of pain for her that she might not be ready for. I kept it to myself, but she told me about the affair. And that fact matters so much to me because it didn't just give me information. It gave me an exit. It gave me clarity. It gave me proof. It saved my life. I don't mean that in a casual, dramatic way. I mean it in the real sense that sometimes the truth is the thing that pulls you out of a situation that is slowly destroying you. Sometimes the truth is the only thing strong enough to break the spell. Because betrayal like that can make you doubt yourself, especially when the person doing it is manipulative. They can lie so smoothly. They can make you feel crazy for questioning. They can make you feel like you're overreacting. They can make you chase your own tail, trying to fix a marriage while they're quietly breaking it behind your back. Her honesty cut through that. And the irony is, she didn't owe me that. She didn't have to step into that mess. She could have stayed quiet out of fear or embarrassment. She could have protected herself and walked away. But she chose to tell me, whether she did it because she felt guilty or because she wanted the truth out in the open, or because she realized she'd been lied to too. The result was the same. She did the right thing in a situation where the man at the center of it was doing everything wrong. It's hard to explain to people how confusing that feels emotionally, because you go into it thinking you'll hate the other woman, and then you realize she was also being manipulated. You realize she wasn't fully informed. You realize she wasn't some evil mastermind. You realize she was another person caught in his selfishness. And in the end, she did something that had more integrity than he ever showed. So when I look back now, the image in my mind isn't just the affair. It's that answer. She never said no. It's the way my body reacted, like it knew before I did, that I was standing in front of something dangerous and sick. It's the realization that to him, women were not people, they were opportunities. It's the knowledge that we had both been depersonalized, reduced down to what we could provide to him. And it's the understanding that his behavior was not about my worth. It wasn't about what she had that I didn't. It wasn't even about sex in the normal sense. It was about a man who needed to feel powerful, who hated himself, and who dealt with that self-hatred by committing hateful acts toward women. He tried to fill his emptiness by taking and taking, by collecting compliance, by chasing a world where he never had to face the word no. But no is not cruelty. No is not rejection. No is a boundary. No is humanity. No is consent. No is what makes intimacy real, because real intimacy requires choice, not entitlement. His answer showed me he didn't want choice. He wanted access. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. It turns the whole marriage into a different story. It explains the way he treated me. It explains the way he treated her. It explains the way he could betray and lie with a straight face. It explains why he could stand there and say something so disgusting like it was normal. What I carry now, more than anger, is clarity. I carry the knowledge that my boundaries were not the problem. My humanity was not the problem. My no was not the problem. The problem was a man who saw women as objects and called it attraction. The problem was a man who used people as medicine for his own self-hatred. And the person who helped me escape that wasn't him. It was the woman he tried to use in secret, the woman he breadcrumbed, the woman he thought he was controlling. She told me the truth. She gave me the one thing he never gave me, reality. And in doing that, she saved my life. It wasn't one of those moments where someone says something cruel in the heat of the moment and later apologizes. It wasn't a nasty comment that could be written off as a fight or a bad day or a misunderstanding. This wasn't about a sentence he threw at me. This was about what he did behind my back, quietly, on purpose, and then let me live with the consequences, as if it were just life being unfair. I had applied for a job, and for once I felt that small, careful kind of hope you feel when you're trying to build something again. I wasn't daydreaming about some impossible fantasy. I was doing something normal, something responsible. I was trying. I had put myself out there. I had done the paperwork, the application, all the steps that take time and energy. If you've ever applied for a job when you're already stressed or worn down, you know how heavy it can feel. You have to gather yourself, polish your words, sound confident even if you're nervous, and remind yourself that you deserve a chance. I was doing that. I was trying to move forward in a practical way, the kind of way that can change your daily life, your confidence, your options. And I wasn't just throwing my name into some random pile. I was recommended for the position. I actually stood a good chance of getting it. It was the kind of opportunity that could have helped me feel stable again. It could have given me routine, independence, and that quiet pride that comes from earning your own place in the world. I was nervous, yes, because any decent person would be nervous before an interview. But I was also capable. I was willing to learn. I wanted it. There was also a connection in the background that I didn't think much of at first. My husband was friendly with the husband of the person who would be my interviewer. It seemed like one of those small world things, the way people end up connected through friends of friends. In a healthy relationship, that kind of connection could even be a good thing. A healthy husband might say, "That's great, I'll put in a good word." Or, "I know them, so maybe it will help." Or at the very least, "I'm rooting for you." I didn't get that kind of energy from him. Not really. But even then, I didn't imagine what was actually happening. Because what I found out later wasn't just disappointing. It was shocking. It was the kind of thing that makes your stomach drop because your mind can't immediately accept that someone you live with would sabotage you that way. I found out he had called her, not to support me, not to encourage them to give me a chance. He called her and told her I would be a bad fit. He told her I was nervous about the job responsibilities. He painted me as someone who couldn't handle it, someone who would struggle, someone they shouldn't bother with, and they canceled my interview. Just like that, the opportunity was gone. No conversation with me. No chance for me to show up and speak for myself. No chance to prove what I could do. No chance to make a first impression. It was taken from me by a phone call I didn't even know had happened. The humiliation of that is hard to explain because it wasn't just I didn't get the job. It wasn't even I didn't get an interview. It was the realization that my own husband worked against me in a place where I had no defense. He used a connection I didn't even fully think about, and he poisoned the opportunity before it could even begin. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't thoughtless. It required a decision. It required effort. It required him to pick up a phone, reach out, and speak badly about me in a way that would have consequences. And the worst part was, he did it in a way that sounded like concern, like he was being helpful. That's how people like this operate. They don't always say, "I want her to fail." They say something like, "I'm just worried she's not ready," or "I just don't want you to have problems," or "She's nervous and I don't think it's the best fit." They dress sabotage up like care. They make it look like they're protecting someone else when really they're protecting their own control. I didn't even find out in a clean, private way. The truth slipped out through the world, the way truth sometimes does when people can't keep their stories straight forever. The daughter of one of my closest friends worked there. She overheard the boss telling people what had happened, telling them why the interview had been canceled. That's how I learned that my husband had interfered. That's how I learned my name had been discussed like that, in a workplace, by people who didn't know me based on my husband's words. That part stung in a deep way, because it meant people I didn't even know were talking about me, forming opinions about me, not because of my work, not because of my skills, not because they met me, but because my husband decided to give them a negative version of me. It meant I didn't just lose an opportunity. I lost it in a way that made me look weak, incapable, and unreliable. And then, as if that wasn't enough, there was another layer to it that made me feel sick with anger. He had told his parents that I refused to get a job. That wasn't true. I was literally applying. I was literally trying. I was literally being recommended for a position. I stood a good chance of getting it, but he told them I refused, as if I was lazy, as if I was stubborn, as if I was choosing not to contribute. He was creating a story where he was the patient, burdened husband, and I was the problem. He was feeding them a narrative that made him look like a victim and made me look like dead weight. So while I was trying to move forward, He was making sure the people around him believed I wasn't. While I was trying to become more independent, he was cutting the legs out from under me and then telling everyone I wasn't even standing up. That's when it clicked for me, not as a theory, but as a clear, ugly truth. If I got that job, he could no longer be the victim in our relationship. That was the real issue, not whether I could handle the responsibilities, not whether I was a good fit, not whether it was the right time. The real issue was that my success would change the balance of power between us. My success would make it harder for him to control the story. My success would make it harder for him to claim he was stuck with me, burdened by carrying me. My success would give me options. It would give me independence. It would give me confidence. It would give me financial stability. It would give me a path out if I ever needed one. And someone who benefits from your dependence will always fear your independence. That's the part people don't always understand. Sometimes an abuser or controlling partner doesn't want you to fail because they hate you in some simple, obvious way. Sometimes they want you to fail because your failure keeps them in control. Your failure keeps the narrative in place. Your failure keeps you needing them. Your failure keeps you small enough to manage. And that's what he was doing. He wasn't just being unsupportive. He was actively creating a situation where I couldn't improve my life, and then using that situation to make himself look like the long-suffering spouse. He needed me to be stuck. He needed me to look unreliable. He needed me to look like I wasn't trying. He needed me to look like the problem, because that's what kept him comfortable. It also explained why he could talk about me the way he did. Because he wasn't thinking like a partner who wants the best for you. He was thinking like someone guarding his position, like someone who didn't want the relationship to become equal, like someone who didn't want me to have pride and momentum and a world outside him. I replayed it in my head over and over. The phone call, the interview cancellation, the boss talking about it, my friend's daughter overhearing, his parents believing his lies. It was like I kept circling the same question because I couldn't accept the answer. Why would a husband do that? Why would someone who claims to love you sabotage your future? And the answer, as painful as it was, came back to the same thing again and again. Because if I got that job, he couldn't play the victim anymore. He couldn't say I was holding him back. He couldn't say I refused to work. He couldn't say he had to carry everything. He couldn't say I was the reason his life was stressful. He couldn't say he was the good one trying so hard while I did nothing. He would lose his favorite role. He would lose the sympathy he earned by making me look bad. He would lose the control he had by keeping me insecure. And he was willing to hurt me, publicly and privately, to keep that role. That's why it wasn't what he said to me. It was what he did. It was the fact that he smiled at me at home, looked me in the face, and acted like my job search was normal, while behind the scenes, he was quietly making sure I wouldn't get anywhere. It was the fact that he didn't just let me fail naturally if I failed. He intervened. He made sure I didn't even get a chance. That kind of betrayal is a specific kind of loneliness because it teaches you that you can't even trust the ground you're standing on. You start to wonder what else he interfered with. You start to question other moments in your life where things didn't work out, and you ask yourself if he had a hand in those too. You start to feel like your reality has hidden traps in it, and the person setting them is the person who was supposed to protect you. And it changes the way you view support. Because support isn't just cheering someone on. Support is not actively sabotaging them. Support is not calling someone's potential employer to warn them away. Support is not telling your parents lies to make yourself look better. Support is wanting your partner to succeed, even when their success makes you less central. A healthy husband would have been proud of me for trying. Even if he felt insecure, he would have dealt with it like an adult, not like a manipulator. He would have encouraged me, helped me practice interview questions, reminded me of my strengths. He would have wanted me to feel confident. Mine wanted me to stay under him. That's the truth I had to face, and it hurt because it stripped away any remaining illusion I had about who he was. It showed me that his victim identity wasn't something that happened to him. It was something he maintained. He maintained it by making sure I couldn't rise. He maintained it by making sure I looked like the problem. He maintained it by lying to people about me and by interfering in my life when I wasn't looking. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. It turns past arguments into something clearer. It turns past confusion into a pattern. It turns your gut feelings into proof. And it makes you realize that you weren't failing because you weren't capable. You were being blocked. You were recommended for that position. You had a real shot. You were doing the right thing. The cancellation wasn't about your ability. It was about his need to keep you from stepping into a life where you didn't need him. That's what he stole from you in that moment. Not just an interview, but a chance to move forward. A chance to feel strong again. A chance to build something for yourself. A chance to prove, not only to them but to yourself, that you were capable. And even though he succeeded in canceling that interview, he didn't get to own the truth forever, because the truth came out. The truth always has a way of creeping into the light, through overheard conversations, through people who can't keep secrets, through small cracks in the stories manipulators tell. You found out. You saw him clearly. And that clarity is powerful, even when it's painful. Because now you know it wasn't in your head. It wasn't you being paranoid. It wasn't you refusing to work. It wasn't you being incapable. It was him actively working against you while pretending to be the one who was suffering. And once you know that, you can stop blaming yourself for a door he quietly slammed shut.
Forgive me for stepping in for just a moment. If you've only recently found your way here, then welcome. I'm glad you came. If these stories are keeping you company tonight, consider subscribing to Crowvane Manor. New stories arrive here often, the kind that stay with you long after the night is over. And if you tap the bell, you won't have to go looking. The next one will find you on its own. Thank you for being here. Now, let's return to where we left off.
When I look back on it now, I can see it so clearly that it almost makes me laugh, but not in a cute way. More like that sharp, bitter kind of laugh you do when you finally realize how obvious something was the whole time. We were barely even dating. It wasn't like a real relationship with effort and respect and a steady foundation. It was more like we were hanging out, and even during that short time, he treated me poorly. I can't even dress it up as he had a few bad moments. The truth is, he was disrespectful the entire time, and the only reason it lasted as long as it did was because I was young and still learning how to listen to my own gut. I was 22. I was out with a girlfriend, and we were doing what 22-year-olds do. We went to a club. We were trying to have a fun night, and I wasn't sitting there thinking about managing some man's mood. I wasn't cheating. I wasn't doing anything shady. I wasn't disappearing to hurt him. I was literally just out with a friend. The only problem was the service was terrible, like it is in a lot of clubs. You know how it goes. You can have full bars 1 second and then nothing the next. especially when you're surrounded by people and concrete and loud music. My phone wasn't working well, and I wasn't responding. Meanwhile, he was blowing up my phone. Not a normal, "Hey, are you okay?" text. Not a casual, "Have fun, text me later." It was that kind of rapid, aggressive messaging where you can practically feel the anger through the screen. He wasn't checking on me. He was trying to control me. He wanted an immediate response, and the fact that I wasn't giving it to him, even for a completely normal reason, was enough to set him off. I didn't even know how bad it was until service finally came back. When you were out, you don't always notice your phone acting weird until it suddenly lights up with a bunch of delayed notifications. That's what happened. My phone finally caught a signal, and all these messages came through at once. And then I saw it. In one message, he called me a dog-ass cunt. It was so sudden and so disgusting that I didn't even have time to talk myself into confusion. There was no debating it. There was no trying to interpret it gently. There was no, maybe he meant it differently. It was exactly what it was. A grown man calling me a vile name because I wasn't replying fast enough while I was out with a friend in a club with bad service. And the thing is, something in me clicked so hard in that moment that it almost felt like my brain and body finally agreed on something. I didn't argue with myself. I didn't write a long response. I didn't try to explain the service issue. I didn't try to calm him down. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to salvage anything. I blocked him as soon as I read it, and I never spoke to him again. I'm proud of that part, because I know how easy it is for someone at 22 to get pulled into the cycle, to respond, to defend yourself, to let them twist it into a bigger fight, to get sucked into proving you're a good girl or a loyal girl or whatever else they want you to perform for them. But the moment he sent that message, he made it simple. He crossed a line that didn't require a complicated decision. He showed me who he was, and I believed him. Still, even though I blocked him immediately, I knew myself well enough to know I needed backup. Not because I thought I'd go back to him right away, but because I understood how people can get weak when the apology comes, or when loneliness hits, or when you start second-guessing. I didn't want to be the kind of person who blocked him in a strong moment and then quietly unblocked him later because I felt bad, or because he guilted me, or because he pretended he didn't mean it. So the next day I went to brunch with my dad, and I made my dad read the messages. Not because I needed my dad's permission, but because I needed accountability. I needed someone who loved me, someone who would not let me rationalize it away, to see the truth with their own eyes. I needed to feel embarrassed in a healthy way, the kind of embarrassment that locks a boundary into place. Because once your dad has read a message like that, you can't pretend it wasn't that bad. You can't minimize it. You can't romanticize it. You can't quietly return to the person who sent it without facing the fact that you'd be walking back into disrespect. It was honestly one of the smartest things I've ever done. It took the secrecy out of it. It took away the private little space where toxic people thrive, where they can treat you horribly and then love bomb you in secret and get you to doubt your own memory. I dragged the truth into the light, put it on the table in front of someone who cared about me, and that made it real in a way that couldn't be undone. And that was it. He was done. Over. Of course, that wasn't the end of him trying. He has tried to reach me many times over the years. That alone tells you something. Men like that don't like losing access. They don't like a clean cut. They don't like a woman who refuses to negotiate her own dignity. They especially don't like being blocked without a long emotional conversation where they get to twist the story and make themselves the victim. A clean block is a kind of power. It's you saying, you don't get any more of me. You don't get my energy. You don't get my time. You don't get my explanations. You don't get a second chance to talk your way out of what you did. So he kept trying, but I didn't budge, because the word he used wasn't just an insult. It was a preview. It was a warning label. It was a sign of what would have come next if I had stayed. If he was comfortable calling me that over a delayed text response, what would he have called me during a real argument? What would he have done when he felt truly threatened? What would he have done when he had more emotional access, more control, more investment in the relationship? That message wasn't just rude. It was a red flag waving so violently it was almost a gift. It saved me time. It saved me years. It saved me from the version of life where I'm walking on eggshells and apologizing for things that aren't wrong and trying to keep the peace with someone who doesn't know what peace is. That's why even now, when I think about him trying to reach out all these years later, I feel nothing but a hard no. Not curiosity, not nostalgia, not even anger most of the time. Just a clear, simple boundary, no and yes. I mean it exactly the way you mean it when you say, fuck that. Because the truth is, the only reason he tried to come back isn't because he suddenly became a better person. It's because he didn't like being the one who got cut off. It bruised his ego. It annoyed him. It bothered him that he couldn't keep me in his orbit. It bothered him that I didn't stick around as a punching bag, emotionally or verbally. It bothered him that he didn't get to rewrite the ending into something softer, something like, we just drifted apart. He wanted access back, not because he respected me, but because he hated that I took control away from him. There's also something so telling about the way he chose that moment to unleash that language. It wasn't even face to face. It wasn't even in the middle of a complicated conflict. It was because I wasn't responding fast enough. That's a control issue. That's entitlement. That's someone who believes they deserve immediate attention whenever they want it, and who sees your time and freedom as something they can punish you for. And I didn't just dodge a bad boyfriend. I dodged a whole future of being monitored, accused, insulted, and controlled. The kind of man who texts like that at 22 doesn't magically become gentle at 30. That kind of man either gets serious help and changes, or he gets worse. And he certainly doesn't deserve a woman who was simply out with a friend, living her life. Sometimes I think about the urge I had back then, the one that still makes me shake my head because it was so petty and so tempting. I almost printed out the texts and mailed them to his mom. And honestly, the only regret I have is that I didn't do it, because I can picture it. I can picture the envelope arriving, her opening it, reading exactly how her son spoke to a woman because she didn't reply fast enough, and feeling whatever she would feel. Shame, anger, denial, sadness, maybe all of it. Part of me wanted that accountability to exist somewhere beyond me. Part of me wanted him to have to sit with the reality of who he was, not in his own mind where he could excuse it, but in someone else's eyes. And maybe I didn't mail them because I didn't want the drama. Maybe I didn't mail them because I didn't want him to have any more involvement in my life, even through revenge. Maybe I didn't mail them because deep down I knew the best punishment was my absence, my silence, my refusal to let him take up another inch of space. But I get why that thought still makes me smile a little. Because there's something satisfying about the idea of a grown man having his own words placed in front of the person who raised him. Not edited, not softened, not explained away, just printed, just real, just undeniable. Still, bigger victory is the one I actually chose. I blocked him. I held the line. I didn't let him charm his way back in. I didn't fall into that trap where you give someone a second chance because they act sorry, and then you end up hearing the same words again later, only worse, because now they know you'll tolerate it. I didn't tolerate it. I didn't negotiate. I didn't wait for more proof. I didn't stick around long enough to collect more trauma. And I love that I brought my dad into it, not because I needed rescuing, but because I had the wisdom to build a guardrail around myself. I didn't let it become a private shame I carried alone. I made it public in the safest way with someone who cared about me, so I couldn't talk myself into going back. Now, when I think about being 22 in that club with bad service, I don't feel embarrassed. I feel proud. Proud of the way my instinct kicked in. Proud of the way I chose myself quickly. Proud of the way I didn't confuse cruelty for passion or control for love. Proud of the way I didn't let him rewrite reality. And every time he tried to reach out over the years, every attempt to slip back in, every little message or call or whatever he did, it only confirmed that blocking him was the right move. Because a man who respects you doesn't need to chase you after calling you something like that. A man who respects you wouldn't have said it in the first place. So, no, he doesn't get access. He doesn't get forgiveness. He doesn't get a response. He gets the same thing he earned in that moment. Nothing, silence, a locked door. The clear consequence of being the kind of person who thinks he can speak to a woman that way. And the funniest part is, he probably still tells himself some story where you were the problem. Men like that always do. They always find a way to frame themselves as misunderstood. They always claim you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too something. But it doesn't matter what story he tells himself, because the truth is still sitting there in black and white, in his own words. And I'm still gone. I told him about my life the way you tell someone when you're trying to be honest and open, the way you do when you're giving them a real chance to know you. I didn't give him some polished, perfect version where everything sounded neat and easy. I told him the truth. I told him I had earned my bachelor's degree. I told him I worked as an admin at a medical college. I told him I went to culinary school and was working as a cook and baker. I told him I'd also worked for an airline after college before the medical school job. I explained it the way I was used to explaining it, like a normal adult with a normal working history, someone who has done different things, learned different skills, and kept going. And then I told him the part that wasn't just a resume. I told him I was in a mental health program now. I told him why. I told him I had a mental break after my sister died suddenly while I was out of town for work. That wasn't a detail I shared lightly. Losing someone like that doesn't sit in your life like a simple, sad memory. It hits your nervous system. It rearranges your sense of safety. It changes how your body responds to the world. It can take the ground out from under you in a way that's hard to describe until you live it. And the fact that it happened while I was out of town made it even worse. Because grief already carries guilt, and being far away when it happened can carve that guilt deeper. So I told him. I told him because I wasn't ashamed of needing help. I told him because I'd done the hard thing, the responsible thing, by getting support. I told him because I believed that if someone wanted to be close to me, they should understand what I've lived through and respect the work I was doing to heal. What I got back from him was the first clear sign that he wasn't a safe person. We were out in public, and out of nowhere he asked me if I ever worked as a stripper, since I worked so many jobs. It wasn't said gently. It wasn't said with curiosity about my career path. It was said like a dig, like he was trying to make my life sound shady. Like he wanted to embarrass me, while smiling so he could pretend it was harmless. And it was such an ugly thing to say because it took all the things I had just shared, all the effort and learning and working, and twisted it into something disrespectful. It reduced my history to a cheap stereotype, like a woman who's done a lot of work must have done something sexual for attention or money. It was insulting in a way that felt both crude and calculated. I remember feeling my face change immediately. Not because I was shocked he could even think it, but because he said it out loud in public, like he was testing how much disrespect I would accept. I told him, "Wow, that's disrespectful." I didn't laugh. I didn't play along. I named it for what it was, and he did what people like that always do when you call them out. He backpedaled and said, "Oh, it's just a joke." That line, "it's just a joke," is one of my least favorite tricks because it's not actually about humor. It's about avoiding responsibility. It's about tossing something cruel at you and then watching your reaction. If you swallow it, they learn they can keep doing it. If you react, they pretend you're the problem for not being fun. It's a way to insult you, then blame you for feeling insulted. It's a way to keep the disrespect, but hide it behind a smile. That was the first red flag because it showed me he didn't see my life as something to respect. He saw it as something to poke at. Later that night, I saw what was underneath that joke. He got drunk, and it was like the mask slipped. Or maybe it was like he felt brave enough to say what he already believed. He went on a rant about how something was wrong with me because I couldn't get over my sister's sudden death, and I needed to just enjoy life. That kind of statement is the kind of thing that makes your stomach drop because it's so ignorant and so cruel at the same time. It wasn't just that he didn't understand grief. Lots of people don't understand grief. It was that he decided my grief meant something wrong with me, like my pain was a character flaw, like my love for my sister was an inconvenience, like the trauma of losing her suddenly should be something I could snap out of if I just tried harder. It was the kind of cruelty that comes from someone who doesn't have empathy but still wants to feel superior, so they turn your vulnerability into a reason to judge you. He kept going, too. He didn't stop at one comment. He started talking about my mental health program like it was proof that I was a burden. He said something like, "How are we going to be together if I have to take meds and be in one program after the next? Not how can I support you? Not I'm sorry you went through something that painful. Not I'm proud of you for getting help. Not even a basic human response like, that must be hard." He framed it like my healing was a problem for him, like my medication was a problem for him, like my effort to survive and function after losing my sister was some inconvenience he'd have to tolerate. That's when it hit me that he didn't want a partner. He wanted someone easy to manage, someone who never needed support, someone who never had hard days, someone who never needed patience, someone whose life existed to be pleasant for him. He also brought religion into it in the worst way. He said something about how I was always talking about being in church and that I needed to pray about it. Now, I'm not against prayer. I'm not against faith. But what he was doing wasn't spiritual support. It was weaponizing religion as a way to dismiss my mental health and dismiss my grief. It was like he was saying, if you really believed, you wouldn't be struggling. If you really prayed, you wouldn't need meds. If you were right, you'd be over it already. That kind of thinking is not love. That's judgment dressed up as morality. And it's especially cruel because it targets the part of you that's trying to stay grounded. It takes something meaningful and turns it into another stick to hit you with. What made it even worse was how he said all of this after I had been honest with him. I had told him about my sister, I had told him about my breakdown. I had told him about being out of town when it happened. I had trusted him with something tender and raw, and instead of handling it with care, he handled it like ammunition. There's something about that kind of response that makes you feel exposed. Like you handed someone your most fragile truth, and they immediately looked for a way to make it ugly. It makes you regret opening up. It makes you feel like you need to hide. It makes you feel like being human is a mistake around them. And that's why, even if I couldn't label it as hate in some dramatic way, I knew it wasn't love. It wasn't moving toward love. Not even close. Love doesn't make a joke about stripping because you've worked different jobs. Love respects the work you've done, the education you earned, the effort you've put into building a life. Love doesn't shame you for grief. Love doesn't act like you're broken because you lost someone suddenly and your nervous system didn't bounce back on a schedule. Love doesn't treat medication like a moral failure. Love doesn't treat therapy like something embarrassing. Love doesn't use church as a tool to silence you or shame you. Love sounds like, I'm sorry. Love sounds like, that must hurt. Love sounds like, I'm proud of you for getting help. Love sounds like, how can I support you when it's hard? Love sounds like, your sister mattered and your grief makes sense. Love sounds like patience, not pressure. What he gave me that night was the opposite. He gave me disrespect in public and cruelty in private. He gave me the kind of comments that make you feel like you have to defend your own pain. He gave me the kind of attitude that suggests he wanted me to hurry up and become a version of myself that didn't have needs. And the thing is, the more I sat with it afterward, the more I realized how telling the whole sequence was. First, he tested disrespect with a joke in public. Then later, when he was drunk and comfortable, he revealed how he truly saw me. It wasn't a one-off bad comment. It was a mindset. He saw my life as suspicious. He saw my grief as weakness. He saw my healing as a burden. He saw my faith as something to use against me. And I didn't need to debate whether that was hate or not to know what mattered. What mattered was that it wasn't safe. It wasn't kind. It wasn't respectful. It wasn't love. It was someone standing in front of a woman who had survived real loss and was doing real work to heal. And instead of meeting her with compassion, he met her with judgment and contempt. So no, maybe it wasn't hate in the simplest sense, but it definitely wasn't moving toward love. In my book, love doesn't make you feel smaller for surviving. Love doesn't demand that you get over it to make someone else comfortable. Love doesn't shame you for being human. And the fact that you could feel that so early, the fact that you could recognize it as a red flag, tells me something important too. It tells me you know what respect should look like. It tells me your instincts are working. It tells me you're not confusing cruelty for honesty or control for care. Because that night wasn't just a bad date. It was a preview. It was him showing you that if you stayed, every hard part of your life would be treated like an inconvenience. And every tender part of you would be treated like something to mock or judge. And you deserved so much better than that. I was diagnosed with HIV when I was in my first trimester of pregnancy, and even now, when I say that sentence in my head, I can still feel the way the world tilted when I first heard it. It was the kind of news that doesn't just land in your mind, it lands in your whole body. It changes the way you breathe, the way your skin feels, the way time moves. 1 minute you're thinking about normal pregnancy things, about appointments and vitamins and plans and names, and the next minute you're staring at a reality you never imagined would be yours. We were newlyweds then, and we had known each other since middle school, which made everything feel even more surreal. This wasn't some stranger I'd met recently. This was someone whose history was braided into mine. Someone who had been around long enough to feel like part of the same hometown air I grew up breathing. There was a part of me that believed, because of that long history, that we would face whatever came together. I believed that if anything scary happened, he would be the one person I wouldn't have to convince to care. Those early days after the diagnosis felt like standing in the middle of a storm without shelter. I was terrified, not just for myself, but for the baby. I was scared of the unknown, scared of what it meant, scared of how people would look at me if they knew, scared of whether my life was about to become a long list of doors closing. I was also carrying a kind of shame that wasn't even mine to carry. The kind society tries to hand you with a diagnosis like that, even when you've done nothing wrong. I had to deal with all the medical information, all the appointments, all the questions that have to be answered when your body becomes a file. But I also had to deal with the emotional shock of it, the way it made me feel like my body had betrayed me, and the way it made me feel suddenly fragile while I was still expected to keep functioning. In the middle of all that, I needed my husband to be my partner. I needed him to be the person who held my hand and said, "We're going to get through this." I needed him to be the person who sat with me in the fear without making it worse. I needed him to be steady because I wasn't steady. I was scared and pregnant and newly married and trying not to fall apart. Instead, once he found out he was negative, something in him turned cold. He began calling me the Grim Reaper. That name was not a joke. It wasn't dark humor between two people who were coping together. It wasn't something we laughed off to relieve tension. It was a weapon. It was a label meant to make me feel disgusting and dangerous, like I was death walking around the house, like I was something to avoid or fear. It took my diagnosis and turned it into an identity he could throw at me whenever he wanted to remind me that he thought I was dirty, that he thought I was the problem, that he thought he was the lucky one and I was the cursed one. There is a special kind of pain in being treated like that by the person who promised to love you. Because it doesn't just hurt your feelings, it changes the way you see yourself. You start looking at your own hands and wondering if you really are something terrible. You start flinching at your own reflection, not because you believe it, but because someone you trusted is trying to make you believe it. You start feeling like your skin is suddenly a boundary between you and the rest of the world, and you don't know if you are allowed to be close to anyone anymore. You start shrinking emotionally because you don't want to give them another reason to call you that, another moment to use your diagnosis against you. And it wasn't just the name. The name was a symptom. It was a sign of the bigger sickness in the way he treated me. He had his test result, his "I'm negative," and instead of responding with relief and gratitude and compassion for what I was dealing with, he responded by separating himself from me in his mind. He acted like I was a different species, like we weren't newlyweds anymore, like we weren't a team anymore, like my diagnosis made me someone he could degrade. What made it even harder was that I was still pregnant. I was trying to carry life while being spoken to like I was death. I was trying to keep my stress down while living with someone who enjoyed stressing me. I was trying to stay emotionally stable for the baby while living with someone who made me feel unstable on purpose. Every day, I had to summon strength just to get through the basics, and he was there, turning my hardest moments into his opportunities to be cruel. Years went by, and that cruelty didn't disappear. It didn't soften into maturity. It didn't get replaced by understanding. It became part of the air in the relationship. It became the background noise. the steady drip of disrespect that can wear you down until you don't even recognize how tired you are. People think that the big betrayals are always loud, but sometimes the betrayal is quiet and constant. Sometimes it's the way someone looks at you, the way they talk to you, the way they treat your pain like a nuisance. Sometimes it's the way they keep you emotionally alone inside a marriage. One of the moments that still makes my chest tighten when I replay, it happened years later when I was having a miscarriage. It's hard to describe the loneliness of that without feeling it all over again. Miscarriage is already a grief that steals your breath. It's not just physical pain, it's the loss of a future you were holding in your mind. It's the way you can feel your body doing something you can't stop. It's the fear and the blood and the confusion, and the way your heart tries to process something that your body is already living through. When it started happening, I needed help. I needed support. I needed someone to drive me, to sit with me, to make me feel like I wasn't going to fall apart alone. This is the kind of moment where a partner's presence matters. Even if they can't fix anything, even if they can't stop it, even if they don't know what to say, being there is the minimum. Being there is love in action. He didn't do that. He had me drive myself to the ER while I was miscarrying so he could stay home. And what he stayed home to do wasn't some urgent duty that only he could handle. He stayed home to order pizza while watching our 6-year-old for 10 hours. I want to be fair to the reality that childcare is real, that kids need to be supervised, that sometimes you can't bring a child into every hospital situation. I understand that. But what I can't understand, what I will never be able to understand, is the way he chose to handle it. There are 100 ways he could have shown care. He could have called someone to come sit with our child so he could take me. He could have asked a family member, a friend, anyone. He could have made a plan. He could have acted like the emergency mattered. He could have been gentle. He could have been worried. He could have been a husband. He could have treated me like a human being who was losing something and hurting. Instead, he made me drive myself through one of the most painful moments a woman can go through. And he treated his own comfort like the priority. He chose pizza and the couch and being at home while I was in crisis. There's a kind of message that gets sent when someone does that. It says, "Your pain is not important enough for me to inconvenience myself." It says, "You can handle it alone." It says, "I don't want to be bothered." It says, "I am not a partner to you when it's hard." It says, "You exist to absorb suffering while I stay comfortable." That day wasn't just a bad day. It was proof of what he had been showing me all along. And then, at some point after years of this, he finally said out loud, something that felt like it had been living under the surface the whole time. He said, "Aren't you tired of chasing happiness? I should have left when you were diagnosed." Those words have a cruelty to them that doesn't need interpretation. He wasn't talking about the marriage like a shared thing that had been tested by hardship. He wasn't saying he regretted how he handled fear back then. He wasn't saying he was sorry for the way he treated me. He was saying he believed leaving me when I was diagnosed would have been the right choice. He was saying he saw my diagnosis as the moment he should have abandoned me. He was saying that in his mind, my life with HIV was not a life worth staying for. He was saying that he had been resenting me for surviving, resenting me for still wanting joy, resenting me for still wanting a loving life. And the chasing happiness part was so revealing because it meant he saw my desire for a better life as annoying. He saw my efforts to heal, to build, to keep going as something pointless or irritating. He didn't want me to reach for happiness because if I reached it, it would expose how little he gave. If I believed I deserved happiness, It would challenge the way he treated me. If I kept trying to live, he couldn't comfortably sit in the role of the martyr who had to put up with me. In that one sentence, he managed to insult my resilience, shame my hope, and threaten abandonment all at once. It was like he wanted to make sure I understood that he believed my life should be smaller, sadder, and more grateful for crumbs. He wanted to remind me that in his mind, my diagnosis was something I should still be punished for, even years later. Something in me finally broke open after that, not in a dramatic, screaming way, more in a quiet way, like a door that had been stuck for years finally swinging open. Because when someone tells you plainly that they should have left you when you were diagnosed, it forces a kind of clarity. It forces you to admit the truth you've been trying to soften. It forces you to stop pretending that this is just stress or miscommunication or men not being emotional. It forces you to see the shape of the relationship clearly. He was not moving toward love, he was moving toward contempt. And contempt is a relationship killer. Contempt is what happens when someone doesn't just struggle with your flaws. They look down on you for being human. Contempt is what happens when someone sees your pain as something they're superior to. Contempt is what happens when someone uses your hard moments as reasons to degrade you instead of reasons to show up. A month later, I left him. I didn't leave in the same minute he said it, because leaving is rarely that simple. Leaving takes planning, especially when there is a child involved. Leaving takes the kind of courage that has to be built step by step when you've spent years being chipped at. But I left within a month, and that matters to me, because it means that even though I stayed too long, even though I absorbed more than I should have, there was still a part of me that knew I deserved to be treated like a person. There was still a part of me that understood I was not obligated to stay and be insulted and abandoned in pieces. That was 10 years ago. 10 years is a long time, and yet there are moments that still feel close when I think about them. Not because I want them to, but because certain kinds of cruelty leave a mark. You don't forget being called the Grim Reaper by your own husband. You don't forget driving yourself to the ER while miscarrying because your husband chose pizza and comfort over your pain. You don't forget someone saying they should have left you when you were diagnosed, like your life became disposable the moment you needed compassion. But what I hold on to now isn't just the pain of what he did. I hold on to the fact that I left. I hold on to the fact that I chose myself. I hold on to the fact that I refuse to spend the rest of my life being treated like a burden for surviving. I hold on to the fact that I did what I needed to do, protect my peace and my dignity, even if it came later than it should have. And I also hold on to this truth because it matters. He is negative, and our son, who will be 16 this summer, is also negative. That's a sentence with a lot inside it. It means that despite the fear, despite the stigma, despite all the ways people love to turn HIV into a story of punishment, the reality of your life and your family is not what ignorant people assume. It means your child is okay. It means you have carried motherhood alongside a diagnosis and still protected your child. It means that the story he tried to tell with his cruelty, the one where you were death walking around, was never the truth. It was never reality. It was his cruelty, his ignorance, his need to make you feel small so he could feel bigger. When someone calls you something like the Grim Reaper, they're trying to put a costume on you that you didn't choose. They're trying to make you carry their fear and their shame like it belongs to you. They're trying to make you the symbol of something they don't want to understand. But reality doesn't care about their nickname. Reality is what it is, and reality in your life includes a son who is healthy in that way, and a truth that he could have responded to with relief and gratitude instead of cruelty. I think about the kind of person it takes to get praise from outsiders for being strong and yet be so weak at home that they can't show compassion. Sometimes the cruelest people are the ones who cannot handle the fact that life is messy and painful, so they punish the person closest to them for reminding them. They call you names to create distance. They act cold to pretend they're in control. They blame you for the discomfort of reality. They treat your pain like it's your fault because they don't have the maturity to sit with it alongside you. But the things you did sit with it. You lived through it. You carried it. You did the hard work of moving forward, of surviving, of mothering, of living life anyway. And he responded by trying to tear you down as if your survival offended him. That's why leaving wasn't just a breakup. Leaving was a reclaiming. It was you saying, I'm not going to be the place where you dump your fear and cruelty anymore. I'm not going to let you label me. I'm not going to let you treat me like I'm something terrible when I'm the one doing the work of living. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life asking for basic compassion from someone who sees compassion as optional. 10 years later, there's something powerful about the fact that he tried to make you feel like the end of things, and you are still here. There's something powerful about the fact that he tried to make you feel like your diagnosis was the thing that should have ended your marriage, when the real thing that ended it was his character, his cruelty, his selfishness, his refusal to love you in the way a husband should. There's something powerful about the fact that you did not accept his contempt as your forever. And I know there are parts of this story that still hurt because they should. What happened to you was not small. Being treated like that during pregnancy, being treated like that while grieving a miscarriage, being spoken to like your life was a burden, that kind of cruelty is not something you shrug off. It's not supposed to be normal. It's not supposed to be minimized. It's real harm. But you left. You left 10 years ago. You didn't stay and let him keep rewriting your value. You didn't stay and let him keep punishing you for something that did not make you less human. You didn't stay and let him keep using his fear as an excuse to degrade you. And now your son is nearly 16, and he is negative. And that fact alone is a kind of quiet answer to all the ignorance and cruelty he tried to press onto you. It doesn't erase what he did, but it tells the truth clearly. You were never what he called you. You were never the Grim Reaper. You were a woman who got a diagnosis during pregnancy and still kept going. You were a mother who did what she needed to do. You were someone who deserved compassion and got contempt instead, and still found the strength to walk away. That is not a story of someone chasing happiness in some foolish way. That is the story of someone refusing to give up on life just because someone else wanted them to. That is the story of someone who kept reaching for peace because peace is not a luxury. It's a right. That is the story of someone who finally stopped accepting a man's cruelty as the price of being loved. And if he ever thinks he was the victim in this, if he ever tells some story where he had it so hard, the truth is still there. The hardest thing in that marriage wasn't the diagnosis. It was living with someone who chose cruelty when he could have chosen compassion. The diagnosis didn't destroy the love. His lack of love did. 10 years ago you left, and that decision matters. It matters because it protected the rest of your life. It matters because it drew a line. It matters because it said, I will not live in contempt. It matters because it proved that no matter how long you've known someone, even since middle school, history is not the same thing as safety. It matters because it proved that you can know someone for years and still discover they are not capable of loving you well. And it matters because it proved that when you finally see that clearly, You can choose yourself anyway. That's what I keep coming back to when I sit with your story. Not just what he did, but what you did after. You left, you made a future without him. You built distance between yourself and his cruelty, and you kept going even after all of it. Even after being called names that should never come out of a spouse's mouth. Even after being left alone in pain. Even after being told he should have abandoned you. You are still here, and your son is growing up. And that alone is a kind of victory that his contempt could never take from you. Whilst I was working 3 jobs and doing a master's degree full-time, he looked at me and said, "You will never know what it's like to work a job with real responsibilities." It was such a ridiculous thing to say that if it hadn't been aimed directly at me, I would have thought it was a bad joke. But it wasn't a joke. He meant it. He said it with that tone people use when they want to shrink you, when they want to put you in your place, when they want to rewrite reality so they can stay on top of it. And what makes it even more unreal is that this came from a man who had been unemployed for around a year. The reason I was 3 jobs wasn't because I was chasing some glamorous lifestyle. I was doing it to support both of us. I was keeping the lights on. I was paying bills. I was dragging myself through shifts while also trying to keep up with postgraduate work, the kind that takes your mind and your time and your energy until you're running on fumes. That period of my life wasn't busy in the cute way people say it when they have a lot going on. It was relentless. It was waking up already tired. It was living in schedules and deadlines. It was constantly counting hours, constantly watching the clock, constantly trying to make sure nothing slipped, because if something slipped, the whole structure could collapse. It was trying to show up to class with a functioning brain after working a shift. It was trying to do assignments late at night when your eyes want to close, but you can't afford to stop. It was running on coffee and willpower and whatever small pockets of hope I could find to keep me moving. And in the middle of that, he had the nerve to talk down to me as if I didn't know responsibility. That's why that comment stuck with me. Not because it was the worst thing he ever did, but because it was a perfect snapshot of how he saw the world. Or maybe it's more accurate to say it was a perfect snapshot of how he needed the world to look in his head so he could live with himself. Because if he admitted the truth, if he admitted that I was carrying everything while he contributed nothing, then he would have to face his own failure. He would have to feel shame. He would have to take accountability. He would have to look at the way he was taking from me. And he couldn't do that. So instead he tried to reverse it. He tried to tell me I had no real responsibilities, even while I was drowning in responsibilities. It's the kind of thing that messes with your mind because it's so obviously false that you start wondering what game they're playing. Are they delusional? Are they cruel? Are they trying to provoke you? Are they jealous? Are they ashamed? The truth is, it can be all of those things at once, but the end result is the same. They say something that denies your reality, and if you argue, you waste your energy proving something that should never need proving. Because anyone looking at that situation from the outside would have known who had the real responsibilities. Anyone with basic honesty would have known that working 3 jobs and doing a master's degree full-time is not only responsibility, it's endurance, it's discipline, it's survival, it's the kind of load that breaks people, and you were carrying it anyway. Meanwhile, he was unemployed for around a year. And even after that, he didn't suddenly become this steady, respectable man with the real responsibilities. He claimed to understand. He got fired anyway for gross misconduct. That detail matters because it shows how he operated. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a layoff. It wasn't the economy. It was his behavior. He didn't just fail to show up for you emotionally, he failed to show up for life in the basic way adults are expected to. And instead of owning that, he tried to make himself feel bigger by making you feel smaller. And that wasn't the only betrayal happening at the same time. He was cheating on you with your friend. That alone is such a deep kind of cruelty because it doesn't just break trust, it poisons the idea of safety. It makes you question what you knew, what you didn't know, who you could trust, how long it was happening, what jokes were shared behind your back, what lies were told to your face. Cheating with a friend is like a double betrayal. It's the person you loved and the person you trusted socially choosing each other over your dignity. It's a kind of humiliation that lingers because it touches so many parts of your life at once. He was also violent towards you after doing too much coke. That detail matters too because it adds another layer of danger. It's not just emotional abuse, it's physical threat, it's unpredictability. It's the kind of situation where you don't know what version of them you're going to get, and you learn to monitor everything. Their mood, their tone, their movements, the way they enter a room, the way they look at you. It makes your body stay on alert. It makes your nervous system live like it's always waiting for something to happen. And then there was the moment he threw your phone off the balcony so you couldn't call the police for help. That isn't a small detail. That is control. That is someone actively cutting off your ability to protect yourself. That is someone's making a calculated choice to remove your access to help. It's terrifying because it shows intent. It shows that he wasn't just out of control in some random way. He knew enough to understand that if you had your phone, you could reach someone. You could call the police. You could call a friend. You could call anyone. And he wanted to take that away. When someone does that, it's not just violence, it's imprisonment in a moment. It's the message, you don't get to escape this right now. You don't get to bring outside eyes into what I'm doing. You don't get to reach safety. And the fact that he did, that means he knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew it was serious. He knew you needed help. He just didn't want you to be able to get it. So yes, there are many things in this story that are objectively bigger, more dangerous, more obviously awful than that one comment. Cheating with your friend, violence, drugs, blocking you from calling the police, being unemployed while you carried everything, getting fired for gross misconduct. All of that is heavy and serious. And yet it makes complete sense that the comment is what sticks with you. Because that comment is the emotional summary of all the rest. It's the distilled version of the relationship dynamic. It's him looking at you, a person doing the impossible to survive, and saying, "You're not real. Your work isn't real. Your effort doesn't count. Your responsibilities don't count." It's him erasing your reality and replacing it with a version that protects his ego. When you're with someone like that, you can endure a lot of chaos and still find yourself haunted by one sentence, because certain sentences are like a nail driven into the place you were already raw. That sentence wasn't just rude. It was designed to hit the part of you that was already tired. It was designed to make you doubt your worth. It was designed to make you feel invisible and foolish and inadequate, even while you were literally holding your lives together. It was also designed to keep you in your place. Because if you were allowed to fully believe how competent you were, how responsible you were, how much you were doing, you might have looked at him and thought, "What exactly are you bringing into my life besides pain?" You might have stopped tolerating him. You might have left sooner. You might have realized you were already doing life without his support. So why keep carrying his weight too? People like that often hate the idea of you seeing yourself clearly. They want you exhausted. They want you confused. They want you busy proving yourself. They want you constantly trying to earn basic respect. Because if you stop trying, if you stop believing their version of reality, you become dangerous to their control. That's why he said it. Not because it was true. Not because you lacked responsibility. Not because he had some superior understanding of work. He said it because he needed to feel above you. And it's such a cruel irony because you were the one living in the real world. You were the one with schedules, bills, deadlines, shifts, responsibilities. You were the one making adult choices and paying adult consequences. He was the one escaping into coke, avoiding responsibility, destroying trust, getting fired, and becoming violent. The only way he could feel like the responsible one was by insulting you and pretending reality was flipped. That comment sticks because it's like a bruise you keep pressing by accident. It sticks because it was meant to. It sticks because it landed in the middle of a time when you were already stretched thin. It sticks because it was so unfair, it short-circuited your brain. It sticks because it made you feel unseen at the exact moment you were doing most. And if I could go back and speak into that moment, not to him but to you, I'd want you to hear this clearly, without any softening. Working 3 jobs and doing a master's degree full-time is not knowing responsibility. That is responsibility in its purest form. That is sacrifice. That is grit. That is someone building a future with their bare hands while another person tries to burn it down. His sentence was not a judgment of you. It was a confession of him. It revealed his insecurity. It revealed his resentment. It revealed his need to rewrite the truth so he didn't have to face his own failures. It revealed the way he used words not to communicate, but to control. And it revealed that even when you were saving both of you, he still wanted to make you feel like you weren't enough. So yes, it makes sense that it's the comment you remember. Because it wasn't just a comment. It was the voice of the whole relationship in one line. A voice that tried to erase your strength. But the fact that you're telling this story now, the fact that you can name the context clearly, the fact that you can see how absurd it was, tells me something too. It tells me that voice didn't win. It may have left a mark, but it didn't get to define you.
If you've stayed with me this far, then these stories didn't simply pass the time. They stayed with you. Everything you heard tonight was real. Real people. Real moments. And in each one, something quietly slipped out of place. If you'd like more of the kind that don't let go so easily, subscribe to Crowvane Manor. There are more rooms left open, and more stories waiting behind every door. I'm grateful you spent this part of your night here. Rest well, and I'll be waiting when you return.